got a big one. So for the past few weeks, Games Workshop has led us down this long road of speculation and kind of right up to this point. And today, there were kind of a lot of interesting news and reveals at the Nova Open. Now, Nova has really been growing in recent years. This is probably the biggest reveals at this point. And there's a lot of news here for many Games Workshop games. And whenever there's a huge release like this, I'm always thrilled. I really like these types of events, and the constant new releases and news really ensures that the hobby is never dull, whether or not you like them or not. So let's kind of get into it. And obviously, the biggest news is a brand new army for Age of Sigmar. And in the last 3 Age of Sigmar teaser videos, they strongly indicated that there was this tithe of bones. It was literally the name of the video. But now we know exactly what the bones are used for. The new army is called the Ossiarch Bonereapers. This army is basically described as being relentless, disciplined, and deathless. They are the culmination of centuries of planning by Nagash, and they form the vanguard of his armies. These are literally bone constructs animated by kind of the souls of great warriors, and this kind of grants them the lifetime of experience and brutal physical prowess. Now, these basically are Nagash's answer to Sigmar's Stormcast Eternals. Very similar, almost identical. So ironically, these are the most characterful of Nagash's warriors. Unlike kind of brain-dead animated skeletons or just ghosts that are kind of tormented and just pursued by their own past, these have a distinct personality. They're like individuals. And in recent years, we've seen some kind of isolated aesthetics within a larger army become kind of expanded upon and used to create kind of its own unique independent force. So in some ways, Flesh Eater Courts and both Nighthaunt are this, where, they're just taking 1 or 2 kits and just going with it and expanding into something completely different. And it's obvious in many ways that these share the same weapon, armor, and bone aesthetic as the Morghast, Archai, and Harbingers. And they even have the same paint scheme, right? It's the identical armor. It wouldn't be at all surprised if those units are incorporated into this army. So the main foot troops are the Mortek Guard, which are described as being forthright and dutiful. And then in contrast, the Kavalos Death Riders are these kind of arrogant Uber Knights. Again, kind of the answer to like the Varangard almost. Like they just seem super huge and imposing models. And kind of the elite echelons of the Ossiarch Bonereapers are made up of a variety of bizarre and deadly construct warriors created by the twisted magical bioengineers of the Mortisan priesthood. So one of the best examples of this is the Necropolis Stalkers. They're these kind of bizarre creatures that are infused with the souls of 4 legendary warriors apiece, giving them the ability to shift personalities mid-battle to change their fighting style. So probably more aggressive, more defensive. Just, I don't know. I think that that's an interesting option. They're pretty versatile. So, aesthetically, they're a strange combination of Tyranid warriors, a General Grievous from Star Wars, and Quintesson from Transformers, that weird guy in the movie that switches the heads depending on his emotion. They also have kind of this war machine called the Mortek Crawler that is semi-sentient, and it fires these magical ammunition. It's this bizarre centipede creature that's just these giant bones hitch, and this thing is just enormous. It's huge. Based upon the size of the little crew that are, hampering all over it. And in the, in the animated video too, they're pretty substantial in the background. So let's hope it actually has some decent rules and can actually do some damage. Nothing worse than having this massive centerpiece catapult that does nothing. But you never know. It's GW, so who knows? That definitely has some hints of the old Screaming Skull catapult. Collectively, the new faction is led by Catacross, Mortarch of the Necropolis. He's described as perhaps the greatest military strategist, living or dead, the Mortal Realms has ever known. Let's hope he has some cool rules to match up with that. My recent look at Lord Solar Maccareus for the Imperial Guard was a little bit underwhelming. So if he's described as such a brilliant strategist, let's hope he has some rules to match it. And they made kind of an effort to stipulate here that there is no embittered spirit or arc schemer of the world that was. So it's not really Cetra or anything like that, or someone that's being re-envisioned in a death form. And nor is he just like this devoted, mindless automaton. He's really this new paragon on life itself. What I think this is just an incredible model. Kind of bizarre in some ways though, because it's such a centerpiece, right? It's such a static build. It's really just more of a diorama, but gorgeous. We haven't seen something like this since, like, I don't know, like on a much lesser degree, it'd be something like a Casket of Souls or something, right? Where it's like, looks nice, but like, how do you actually get in combat with that thing? And like, I can't see that moving up the board in a way that makes sense. But absolutely gorgeous. I love the model. It's just a little impractical, but that probably won't stop me from buying it. So the pre-order for these is in October, and I believe that there will be some other reveals before then. But I know some people are really put off by this aesthetic. A quick survey Twitter. Some people love it, some people hate it. I actually like that it's just completely out of left field. It's not at all what I was kind of expecting. It's not really in reimagined Tomb Kings at all. It's in some ways, well, I mean, Tomb Kings has some constructs and things like that too, but a completely different aesthetic in some ways. But I think it's nice to have a death faction that is actually heavily armored and elite, rather than just hordes of mindless things that die quite easily. So I think that they're cool, and it's nice to have a new death faction, period. A couple years ago when I was on Warhammer Weekly as kind of the death expert for having a huge undead army, I made the argument that, death doesn't really need that much. But, compared to, chaos and order, they're definitely on the short end, much like destruction. But we'll see. The more things available, the better, that appeal to other people. And I will say that Mrs. Hooves has recently committed herself to Night Hunt, and I showed her this release, and she didn't seem that interested. So I think it will be a little polarizing, but that's perfectly fine. Strong feelings and reactions are good. They just demonstrate that some people will love it, even if others don't. So, Age of Sigmar has seen a few new armies in recent years, but still, a new army is definitely not something to, it doesn't happen too often. So it's still very nice to see. And so at this point, I'll just quickly go through the other news. There's some interesting things here, but I think a new Death Army certainly takes the cake. So Warcry has its first expansion, and I'm probably a little slow off the draw here. I own the game, but I haven't actually played yet. So the new expansion seems very fast-paced. It could come out in a couple months, I guess, but I don't know. I just feel like, personally, I had a little more time to play around the basic game before new expansions were coming out. So at the same time, it's nice to have things that are supported, and it's always good to have more things coming out that can push people in different ways. And of course, the idea of throwing in a giant monster to smash apart warbands sounds like a bloody good time. Nice side gore running into the battlefield and hacking people to shreds. Not bad, not bad. So the Middle-earth strategy battle game has a brand new expansion. This one's called the War in Rohan, and at the very least it has some beautiful modular terrain that can be easily incorporated into other games. I love Lord of the Rings. I just never got into the game. So something dark and terrifying is going to be unleashed in Necromunda. Now, I'm not too familiar with the background or history of that game to, make a particularly educated or confident guess, I should say. Videos seem to tease kind of a single model of some sort. So, recent releases have been more along the lines of mercenaries or, a single guy that you can add into a warband to spice things up. And that's basically what it looks like. So, ironically, what I am excited for is kind of more old Space Marine characters to cross that Rubicon Primaris and be reborn as beautiful, larger, reimagined sculpts. What I can say is I love the old character models, and quite recently I almost bought every single one off the Games Workshop website. I guess it's a good thing I didn't. I still would have liked them, but the new ones are pretty gorgeous, and I'm quite happy to see Shriek or Shrike, however you want to describe the guy, as being reimagined. It's a really cool Space Marine chapter, and he's the first beaky Primaris, which is an interesting distinction. So the Psychic Awakening received a little more attention, but I think the content and meaning still seem a little vague to me. Didn't really describe too much in the video, other than something that was strange. So some form of 40k endless spells is a real possibility, but it's just one of those things that I think ultimately the core here is some sort of narrative expansion and kind of a galaxy spanning campaign. Could be something as simple as more Psychers awakening within the human race. I think the one thing that seems hinted is some form of Eldar crossover. Those runes in the videos certainly look kind of Eldar-ish, and they tease the new plastic Howling Banshee. I have plenty of Howling Banshees, but anytime they kind of re-release new plastic models is nice, and maybe kind of an Eldar focus would be pretty cool. I'm happy with that. Who knows what that actually is going to end up being, though. So Warhammer Heroes is coming back for the 3rd season. There's a global tournament for Warhammer Underworlds. Okay, great. Both things. Whatever happens with either of those, awesome. I like Underworlds. I'm just, kind of oblivious to kind of a competitive scene for it. And they also reviewed kind of the progress of the animated show Angels of Death. Now, I hadn't heard much about this before. I think I vaguely recall some article a while back about it, but the bottom line for any of these shows that they're making, please make them good, right? Please make them of sufficient quality. I've been let down in this area so many times. And I think there's just a huge amount of depth there for many stories, if only they can get some success and momentum. So I hope it's a success. Now, Warhammer Legends will have rules and point values that will be supported forever, but they will not be actively changed or updated. Now, I own plenty of discontinued models, but maybe I'm a little out of date on this topic. I kind of assume that is how Warhammer Legends always worked. So I'm not really sure. I can't tell for certain if there's any news there at all. I don't know what they were doing before. I know they had kind of a dedicated sub website for it, but I just kind of assumed that there were always points and rules, and that it wouldn't be updated. But I'm kind of at a loss as to why that's something worth talking about. So finally, they previewed the new Sisters Battle army and models, and that box concept is a little strange. It's not really a start collecting box. It's like a start army box for the brand new models. And there's going to be a unit of sisters in that box that they previewed previously. A beautiful Seraphim model, presumably more than one. A reimagined penitent engine, which is one of my always favorite models, and probably the only male model in the range. Poor little guy. And a beautiful new Canoness. Now, I might be able to convince Mrs. Hooves to step into 40k. One of the few games of 40k she has played, she used my old Sisters of Battle, so maybe a full army of sisters is the lure she needs. But in any case, I'm really thrilled about the new Age of Sigmar army. I love it, actually. I think it's really cool. The expressions on some of those troops are a little weird, but overall, I'm pretty darn happy to have, like a super hardcore death army. I think it's really cool. And everything else that they kind of piled in on it, they really stressed that there was all this new news and reveals for other things. And there is a kind of spattering of other things. I think they all kind of pale in comparison, and they're almost like half reveals because they don't tell the whole story. It's just this little part of little snippets here and there. Just one or two extra models. But in either case, new reveals is always a good day. I'm pretty happy. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.